Jordan, and thank you for having me on this lovely rainy Sunday afternoon. Apologies for not being able to speak in Myanmar language today. Maybe next year I'll come back and speak in Myanmar language for you all. But anyway, today we're going to be talking about a really interesting and exciting topic that I think will only grow in focus over the coming months, and that's Myanmar's upcoming bidding round for onshore and offshore blocks. The questions we'll be asking today are who will be involved, what will be available, how we can start to prepare, and of course what will be the outcome of the potential bidding round that is coming up. Today I'll be arguing three main items. The first, that we'll be able to learn a lot from the history of what has led up to the current point. Second, that we might be a bit pessimistic about the upcoming bidding round just because of the current global situation and things of that nature. But finally, this can act as a really exciting opportunity to reform the way that Myanmar looks at the oil and gas industry and the regulations that go into that. So we'll be having 5 kind of sections, starting off with just a general overview of Myanmar's blocks. And then we'll be grounding our discussion in its historical context. So again, I think there's a lot that can be learned from the 2011 and 2013 bidding rounds, as well as the period from the end of that 2013 and the stagnation that has kind of led up to the current day. We'll then be looking forward to see what might occur towards the end of this year, or perhaps the start of next year, before going over some recommendations that FMR Research has to begin with. So let's start with just a general kind of fact sheet. Myanmar has 103 blocks, 53 of which are onshore, 51 of which are offshore. 24 of those blocks are currently vacant, so potentially made available, and 48 of those are currently non-operating. But for the most part, again, most of these blocks are occupied and are indeed moving forward. Here is the map of interest of what we're going to be talking about today. Of course, in the green we have those blocks that are onshore, and in blue those that are offshore. I will be focusing primarily on the offshore blocks today. I'll get into it in just a moment, but that has been the area that has attracted the most interest. But we'll also be talking a little bit about the onshore blocks as well. So let's start with the 2011 bidding round. And this was a middling success, I would say. It was an opportunity for the country to kind of open up in terms of the blocks that were made available, but for the most part it was a country still under sanctions, right, and not a lot of opportunity for the major players to get involved. Furthermore, it was primarily for onshore blocks, exclusively, I'm afraid, for onshore blocks, and as a result there wasn't quite as much excitement, but I think it certainly did indicate of more exciting things to come, namely the 2013 bidding round. I would like to point out here quickly, though, is the involvement of kind of the PTTEP's Petronas, who were able to start kind of involving themselves or even further in this visiting bidding round. Now the 2013 bidding round, so there were 2, both an onshore and an offshore block, and this was far more successful than the 2011 round. There were 18 onshore blocks made available and 30 offshore blocks that were made available, and the majority of these were indeed picked up by an array of major oil and gas companies from all around the world. It was a clear indication that Myanmar was a place where the major companies around the world were excited to do business and were willing to come in and make themselves available. What we can learn from this is that there is a lot of interest in Myanmar when the conditions are right, and we'll get into that in just a moment. But remember, in 2013 the oil price was very high, and it was a time it was the opening up of Myanmar more generally. So when situations are right, there's a lot of opportunity for Myanmar oil and gas. I would like to dive into these bidding rounds a bit more specifically to highlight the onshore and offshore dichotomy here. So the onshore bidding round took place a bit earlier in the year, and then later on was the offshore. And the offshore was more successful than the onshore bidding round, primarily just because it attracted more of the major global companies. I'll suggest there are 4 kind of key reasons why this might be the case. Firstly, that deep water did not require a local partner, so international companies were excited to come in and kind of have autonomy over their own projects. Second, that offshore is a more technically difficult project and therefore has the potential to be more lucrative. So the more opportunity for revenue generation from these private companies. Third, there's, I think, concern that the onshore blocks were being exhausted. As we all know, that the onshore blocks in Myanmar have a long history and a lot of exploration and production has been involved in those blocks, so there was a bit of concern that that might have dried up, whereas the offshore blocks was very much a new and exciting prospect for a lot of these companies. And finally, I think just a lack of transparency on the onshore industry, just a bit of a hangover from the early 2000s and 19th, 20th century in Myanmar, where we're a bit unsure of what's going on in those onshore blocks. But we can certainly learn here that in the offshore sector, there's a lot of excitement and a potential for growth and attraction of some foreign companies. So that was 2013, right? So it was an exciting time for the country generally, but since then we've had a significant loss of momentum. So half of those blocks that have been awarded have since been relinquished, so given back. And you'll see this new map here, which is different from the other, and it's showing those maps, the blocks that have been given back. So in green, you'll see still the onshore. Those that are in red are those that have been given back by various companies. You'll see a few there, Shell, Statoil, Oil India, for example. And those in blue are still being operated, whereas those in grey were not being operated even before 2017. So what we're seeing here is a slowdown from that initial excitement, and now we're going to dive into trying to explain why that might have happened and how we can rectify the situation and get Myanmar's kind of oil and gas industry back on track. So I've identified kind of 4 key reasons why that slowdown might have occurred, and I'm going to start with the one on your left, which is the regulatory environment, which I've highlighted in bold, because I think that is the most important factor that we can talk about today. And I would suggest that that is a secondary barrier, right? The other 3, global economic conditions, a lack of discoveries, political climate, they are primary barriers that make it a little bit harder to do business. But as we all know, doing business in Myanmar is a challenging environment, right? It's the 4th, that secondary barrier of those regulations, where there's a lot of opportunity to actually encourage investment and move past those initial challenges. But let's start with the global economic condition. So you'll notice this graph, which is tracking the oil price, and you'll see the 2011 and 2013 bidding rounds occurred in quite the heyday, right? You can see really high oil prices, but immediately following those bidding rounds, we see the price of oil drop off considerably. Now, what that basically means is that the companies who picked up blocks in that 2013 bidding round suddenly had a lot less budget for exploratory drilling and were a lot less likely to take risks compared to perhaps when they were initially making the decision to bid on these blocks. I will note there has been an increase in the price of oil, and the market more generally is moving certainly in the right direction. I'm certainly no forecaster of oil prices, but I think we are moving in the right direction. Recent geopolitical changes in terms of potential sanctions against Iran will also, I think, continue to put upward pressure on this oil price. And I think we are getting into a situation where it is becoming, again, more palatable for these major companies to start to look at investing in some more exploration. But again, it's difficult to say. I also think it's important, though, to highlight the natural gas price as well, right? Because that's primarily what we're dealing with here, especially in the offshore area. And again, it's quite similar, right? We can see there was an initial downturn after those initial bidding rounds, but there has been hopefully a steady rise kind of since mid-2016 there. So I think a bidding round that's coming up and generating excitement it's good to see that it's mirroring also a upward trend in the oil and natural gas prices. The second item I wanted to talk about was the discoveries, and I think it's important to note here what companies are looking for, right? They're looking for a commercially viable finding, right? So that is 2 different things to take into account there. What is literally in the ground or available, and then the environment through which it can be extracted or discovered. And I would suggest that One is outside of, it's just the reality, right? But the other is changing and moving in the right direction. So I think it's fair to say that there's been relatively uninspiring 3D exploration since the bidding round. And this year there's only 8 exploratory wells that are planned. Having said that, I think a big reason for that negativity is most likely their expectations were simply just too high in 2013. And we're now starting to see that recalibrate to understand, having a bit more of an idea of what's specifically going on. And that leads into the second part of this equation, which is we're collecting more data. The technological developments are assisting in making it easier to explore and then extract a lot of these materials. So we're moving in the right direction in terms of this equation, getting more closer to a commercially viable finding. I also want to raise here specifically Woodside's current exploration. So this is an Australian oil and gas company who's probably been the most bullish, I would suggest, since 2013. And they're currently drilling in 2 areas. The market is looking at that very closely. And I think a lot of people will make decisions upon any changes or findings that Woodside might have. I think if there are findings, we will move into this potential bidding round with a lot of momentum and a lot of excitement. If not, it might once again kind of dampen the mood. So it'll be very important to keep an eye on how Woodside is going there. The third, and before we get to the regulatory environment, I wanted to bring up was the political situation. And I think this is primarily geared towards international companies who are operating in or looking to come into Myanmar. And I'd also like to suggest that this is something that's probably overblown by the media, but I think still something that needs to be addressed, again, particularly for these international companies who companies in Myanmar will be hoping to work with in the future. And I'd like to divide this grouping up into two sides. We've got the companies that are looking to come into Myanmar potentially, and those that are already here. And I think the way that the political climate and kind of negative PR that's currently circulating in the country affects these two groups in different ways. So those companies entering the country, they've got to justify to shareholders perhaps why they'd be entering in what is seemingly a controversial country at this time. There's the hanging over threat of sanctions, and in a more of a global environment where there are potentially other countries that they might be interested in going into. So I can see why this political environment might be having more of an effect on those companies looking to come in, and they might be less interested in doing so. On the flip side though, the companies that are already here, I don't see it playing as much of a role with them at all. And there are a few reasons for this. One, they're already invested, and they knew what they were getting into when they came to Myanmar. It's a new and a developing country. There's a volatile history, and they were prepared for these potential eventuations. And being in country, they're able to do things like CSR projects and have mitigating strategies to ensure that any kind of reputational damage that might be coming towards their companies, that they're able to mitigate that quite comfortably. So yeah, those are the political issues. But I think what is the most important and fundamental are these, I get this secondary barrier. Okay, so what is the regulatory environment and how it's affecting the oil and gas sector more generally, and specifically encouraging investment. And I'd like to suggest that there is a debate going on about what this regulation is trying to achieve. I think you've got one side of the debate suggesting that it should be to just extract as much revenue for the government as possible, and the other should be to encourage investment and encourage the production and exploration of oil and gas in the onshore and offshore blocks. And my opinion is that we are currently erring too much on the side of trying to extract revenue from an industry that simply isn't developed enough yet. So, for example, the production sharing or the PSCs, these agreements have been put in place since 1989, 1990, and there's been very little change since then. They haven't adapted to this new environment, and particularly what's happened since kind of the bidding round in 2014. Furthermore, you've got a one-size-fits-all for deep water, shallow water, and marginal fields. It suggests a lack of nuance when the government's making these policies, and what we really do need now is a nuanced understanding of what is going to be the most effective way to manage this industry and both attract and benefit from the development of these onshore and offshore blocks. In terms of revenue producing, what we have is a 12.5% on tax on royalties. You've got 8% special good tax, enormous signature bonuses. The World Bank has, and a few other kind of research institutes have come up with some like astronomically high figures about the percentage of take that the government will be getting from these any revenue that's being developed, and it really is discouraging for foreign investors or investors generally coming in and developing these types of blocks. So I think that is what needs to change. I'd also like to add that there is just a general level of uncertainty, of regulatory uncertainty in the industry about what might happen in the future or even what is currently happening right now. For any investors, the most important thing is a full amount of information to understand what type of decision they should be making, and there's still questions over environmental requirements for a lot of these blocks. There's still questions over flexible timelines. There's this kind of almost understanding where you just kind of get control over a block, and if you do have a discovery, perhaps go ahead and renegotiate from there. So all this ambiguity, again, it kind of discourages investment, and it is these secondary barriers which, added on top of natural kind of problems outside of Myanmar's control, which are really, I think, hurting the industry, but where there is a lot of opportunity for improvements to be made. And that's why I'm very excited about this potential upcoming bidding round, because I think it will act as the instigator to go ahead and get a lot of these things re-looked at and hopefully reformed. So that kind of ends the historical portion of the presentation, and as I mentioned, I think there's plenty to be taken from those items. So I think we see that offshore blocks are an attractive option for foreign investors, and I think we've confirmed that bidding rounds can certainly be effective, not only in terms of attracting investors, but in terms of just getting excitement about the industry and potentially causing for reforms that it sorely requires. Third, that has been done in Myanmar yet, but we're not sure what we're working with, and that is something that we need to focus upon. And fourth, I think as we all know here, that Myanmar can be a difficult country to do business in, particularly in the oil and gas sector. And number five, and I've highlighted here, and I've mentioned it before as well, that secondary barriers need to be minimised to ensure that those primary issues that, again, they're outside of Myanmar's control, so we can overcome them. Those secondary barriers need to be minimised, even potentially used as an attractive tool. So, looking forward, been a lot of talk that the government suggested that it would be end of 2018 is when this bidding round would be held. However, it's almost end of June, almost July, so we are certainly running out of time, and there are still a fair few questions that have been left unanswered. For example, which blocks will be included? Do we know if it will be relinquished blocks we put back online, or if there will just be simply new blocks that the government has been working with? We don't know who will be running the process. We don't know if there'll be a consultant who will come in and run the bidding round. And we also don't know which regulations might change. And we heard yesterday that there are opportunities for the PSC agreements to be changed. And this is something that's going to take a lot of time, right? So I would expect perhaps it will be very late 2018, but most likely a 2019 bidding round is just my opinion. But what do we know? So we've got 24 onshore and 24 offshore blocks that are open, and therefore which could potentially be made available. We know the bidding process will eventuate, just from the rhetoric that is coming out of the ministries and the government. And we do know, and again this is based on the rhetoric coming from the ministry officials, that there will be an opportunity to try to attract investment through some of these regulatory options. So let's start with what will be made available. Now, as I mentioned on that previous slide, we're still unsure if relinquished blocks will be made available once more. There's, I think, legal issues to work out as to how that will occur. I suspect we might see, similar to 2013, two separate types of bidding rounds. So one that weren't relinquished, and then later in the year, perhaps those that were relinquished might be also put online. But again, that's some speculation on my behalf. In terms of the new blocks that might be made available, we've got some interesting blocks around the Delta region, OP and Q, and these areas where, and also those onshore blocks as well, where Mogi has been operating them for a number of years. There will be a lot of data there, and I think there will be opportunity if they come online for private companies to come in, have a look at some of this data, and be able to make some really informed decisions about what they want to be investing in and if there'll be opportunities to grow those sectors. I think particularly the blocks around the Delta, there's a lot of interesting mapping that has been done in the past, and though there's been a few wells drilled previously and without much success, I think with increased technology and more professional research techniques, perhaps we will find some reserves there. Some predictions about who will be at the table. I think this is an interesting kind of question, which companies will be interested in participating in this next bidding round, and I've kind of identified four groupings, and I'll start them in that bottom left-hand corner. New international major companies, who I don't expect to be at the table this time, just because if they weren't there in 2013, the environment's only gotten more difficult, and so I would see that not a lot of reason for them to enter the market, but potentially moving past the bidding round, you might see them start to play a role. I also don't expect the bidders who bid in 2013 to try to take on more blocks. I think those that got blocks have, for the most part, tried to delay and push back deadlines or indeed relinquish blocks, so I certainly don't see them looking to participate in the bidding round. The question of Woodside is an obvious example. As I mentioned earlier, they are the most bullish and, I guess, exciting player in that area. Having said that, they've got 8 or 9 blocks already off the Rakhine Coast, and I don't foresee them needing to take on any more blocks into their portfolio at this stage. So the two groups that I foresee playing a more major role in this bidding round are your traditional players, so those companies that have been in Myanmar for numerous decades and might be looking to expand their kind of footprint in the country, considering PTT, Petronas, Total, and PRL, those companies that have got a history in the country, I can see them certainly playing more of a role. And perhaps some more localised or minor players in the industry might be looking to invest or get into some of these blocks with the hope of having a minor discovery and then looking for some other companies to farm in onto their blocks. I suggest moving past the 2018 bidding round or 2019 bidding round, we'll see an environment whereby we have those kind of 4 traditional players still having a major role, plus potentially a Woodside as a 5th kind of major player there. So recommendations on working through some of those initial primary barriers that I identified. Firstly, with not as many discoveries as we would like, there's certainly ways we can overcome some of these issues. The first is more of a data sharing process, right? So that information that has been taken on can certainly, I think, needs to be shared amongst the broader community to understand what exactly we are working with and where more research investigation needs to be done. I think second, there's an option for decreasing the size of the block. So there's a few examples whereby you have a block with 8 or 9 potential areas of interest, but obviously if only one company is operating that block, they're going to focus their attention on the 1 or 2 primary, 1 or 2 most exciting areas. If we can start to divide those blocks up slightly, we might see an opportunity for other companies to be seeking out maybe less exciting but still potential areas of interest. The second is the global economic environment. Again, not a lot that Myanmar can do in that department, but I do think it's an opportunity for Myanmar to look at the global competitive environment to understand where we sit and how to be as competitive as possible in attracting investment and benchmarking ourselves against the broader community. And third, the political environment. Again, not a lot that can be done, but historically these bidding rounds have been an opportunity to show Myanmar as being able to effect transparent and well-run business processes. And I think this upcoming bidding round could be another example of that, where it can show the world that Myanmar is in a space where it can run very effective bidding rounds. I'd now like to kind of work on the final point I want to sum up with, which is that secondary barrier and how we can create a more welcoming regulatory environment. I think the market should be used, rather than a place to extract more funds for the Myanmar government, it should be used as a space to power Myanmar more generally, to power the industrial sector. Gas in the ground is not useful for anyone. So we should be looking for ways to attract more companies. And I think that is done by renegotiating some of these PSCs and to make it easy for companies to get involved. Having said that's not as easy as it might sound. For example, one question that springs to mind is, do those who were on PSCs in 2013, are they changed to new contracts that are made in 2018 or 2019? Or do we have a two-tier kind of contract system? I think if there was a two-tier system, it would kind of fly in the face of the idea of having a fair and transparent bidding round option. But on the flip side, if you were to bring all contracts and make them all aligned, I think that would be a decision that would require very, very top levels of the Myanmar government to get involved, and I think that can take a fair amount of time. I think that the important factor here, though, is that it should be an economic decision, right? It should be not just an arbitrary number pulled out. It should be a decision that makes sure we can find what is the most efficient tax and most efficient signatory bonus that will attract investment, but also at the same time ensuring that Myanmar people and the Myanmar community more generally are going to get the most out of the natural resources that the country is endowed with. And I think that's what we need to be focusing on, and that's what I would like to see moving forward. But again, that kind of brings me to the end of the presentation, where I believe that this upcoming bidding round, though it might not reach the excitement levels or success of 2013, I think it certainly will be an opportunity for a rethinking of the regulatory environment and perhaps spur a really exciting trajectory in the coming years.